Hello, Viva Birdos. Jason Hill here, JP Hill over on the site, and we are pleased to bring you another VEB podcast. This time with The Athletic beat writer and reporter Katie Wu is joining us. Are you in Florida, Katie?
I am in Florida. I am right outside the media workroom right now. I just made very awkward eye contact with Daniel Guerrero, who does some. This is not an invitation for me to come back. You want to be in? Want to say hi? He's does some amazing work for the Post-Dispatch with their minor league coverage. Right behind me is Roger Dean Stadium, and yeah, just another day in Florida.
Great. Well, just to introduce everyone, because I know not everyone is watching, but you'll have Blake here on with us, and Gabe, who you can't see Gabe if you're listening, but he's got an awesome Miles Mikolas stash still, and the hair is flowing in the breeze behind him. Heather Scooter Simon is here as well. And Mike Jones, Skyrick from the site, is joining us as well today. And Katie, let's just jump right into it. And the start today, which was not televised, but you were there bringing us all of the news. Adam Wainwright, velocity was down again. What can you tell us about his start today?
Yeah, so another, I wouldn't say discouraging outing from Adam, but it is a little alarming when you take into consideration how low the velocity is to start the spring, especially given the fact that Adam was supposed to ramp up early to be ready for the World Baseball Classic. So his first start on Saturday, he averaged about 84 miles per hour with a sinker and cutter. That's not what you want. Today, it was more or less the same thing. He was 2 miles per hour higher in overall velocity, up to 86. So that's a step in the right direction. But it's still nowhere close to where he or the Cardinals want to be. So a couple of reasons behind that Adam was explaining. He is dealing with a little muscular flaw, is the word he used to describe it, that that stemmed from back spasms that he had about a week before pitchers and catchers reported. Now, these back spasms apparently tweak some sort of muscle in his left glute and his left leg. So he's not able to rear back and kind of get that full delivery, which is where a lot of his velocity comes from. So that's why you're seeing a notable sign, a decrease in velocity. The good news is for both the Cardinals and Wainwright is that today there was that 2 mile per hour uptick. And again, I'm not saying we should be excited about 86 miles per hour. He certainly wasn't, but that was what the training staff was primarily looking for in terms of progressing. They wanted to see a substantial tick up in velocity. 2 miles per hour as an average over 5 days was noticeable enough and a sign of the right improvement. So yes, a little disconcerting about Adam Wainwright to start the year, but the important thing for both sides was that they saw an improvement in velocity, and though it's still low, there was that improvement they were looking for.
Are you getting the idea that because I mean the games are one thing, but they've got TrackMan, they've got everything there in spring training as well. Was he showing a normal velocity range before these starts, before the problem with the back spasms happened, or do you even have that information?
It kind of just depended because in the backfields, we're so limited with information unless you can get some of the TrackMan guys to tell you something, and they usually don't. He looked fine. He was competitive. He was in good spirits. In his live BPs, he was struck out Paul Goldschmidt a couple times, went toe-to-toe with Tyler O'Neill, had a good battle with Arenado every now and then. But live BPs are simply that. I think this is something that kind of creeped up at just a not ideal time for anyone. Cardinals refused to call it an injury. They made it very clear. Ollie Marmol said today post-game, look, this is not an injury. This is more like rebuilding strength, rebuilding that muscle that he lost. I don't know if anyone out there has ever dealt with back spasms, but they are certainly not very comfortable. It does kind of take a while to regain that feeling and regain that structure, especially if you get into bad habits and kind of overcompensate to alleviate some of those back spasms, which it sounds like Adam was doing. So it does not sound like they are too overly concerned, again, because of that progression in the velocity. They are still fully permitting him to go pitch in the World Baseball Classic. He will be a starter. The days that he is designated to pitch for the team is not yet determined, but he will have at least 9 days in between starts. And he was pretty encouraged about that, saying that gives him plenty of time to hit the training room, do some long toss, and really kind of work through these issues. So let's not sound the alarm bells yet. It is something to keep an eye on. If we're seeing 85 mile per hour readings in the World Baseball Classic, maybe we circle back to this. But for now, patience, right? It's early. I know it's a cliche, but everyone seemed obviously Adam was frustrated given the outing, but all around, no one seemed too overly concerned about it.
Follow-ups, guys?
Will the Cardinals have Wainwright on any kind of pitch restriction in the World Baseball Classic? Have they talked about that at all?
I don't think they'll have anything except what the World Baseball Classic has. They're what is it, 70, 75 pitches. That's about it. I think the only pitcher that they have a true limitation on is Andre Palante for Team Italy. And I think he's around 40 to 45. But Wainwright's full go. And honestly, Team USA will need him and Miles Michaelis, given the amount of pitchers that, have not been able to perform. They lost Nestor Cortez, Clayton Kershaw. So it kind of looks like Adam Wainwright and Miles Michaelis are looking to be the headliners of that rotation.
Interesting. So I guess part of my thing coming at it from an analytical standpoint, first of all, I appreciate your reporting, because if you just look start by start, this resembles the same problem he had back in August. August 28th was when he was, I guess, struck by a pitch on the knee, and then the velocity dropped. Not as extreme as it is right now, leading to his struggles there in September and then missing the postseason roster. This feels like, if you didn't know the story about the back spasms, just a continuation of the same thing that we were seeing late in last season. But the team doesn't seem to indicate there's any connection there at all.
No, there's not seem to be any connection there at all. And I think that's another check mark in the relief department, that this is not a lingering thing. Adam was pretty confident over the offseason he had figured it out. It just seems to be some really unfortunate timing. Got to keep in mind he is 41 years old. But again, we just need to look for, if you're a fan looking for some sort of comfort, just look at the velocity readings. He's never been a guy that's lit up the radar gun necessarily, but if he can do those incremental upticks, 1 to 2 miles per hour, averaging a little higher each start, it'll be a sign that he's in the right direction. Great.
Well, let's jump in then with the rest of the things that we kind of had and wanted to talk about today a little bit. And guys, feel free to jump in with any side questions or anything else that you've got. But so far at spring training, by the way, Katie, will you be there the whole time, or do you get a break from this at some point, the spring training monotony?
Well, I too am going to the World Baseball Classic, which I'm very excited about. I'll have a break from Cardinals coverage, so I've been trying to stack up on as much as possible while I'm here so I can stay updated on the team, but I will have an assignment with The Athletic where I'm not really on Cardinals coverage for the last 2 weeks of the spring, and focusing on the teams in Pool D in Miami. So that'll be a different experience for me. And then I'll get, I think, 4 to 5 days off right before the season starts and just kind of decompress. The Cardinals have that weird last game in Sarasota to end the spring, which kind of throws a wrinkle in everything. So it just made sense to just take a couple of days off before the season started, regroup, clean my apartment, because I probably won't clean it again until October, and go from there.
Sounds good. Well, so it is a long spring. You've seen most of it so far. Who has stood out to you this year in camp?
It's been a lot of the under the radar names, because I feel like so much of this roster and starting lineup is already set, right? Like we've talked about position battles, but the position battles for center field are between 2 to 3 starters that are going to play the outfield no matter what, ideally. We've talked about the middle infield. Well, you have Tommy Edman as your starting shortstop, and you have Brendan Donovan, who can play everywhere. The main story there is Paul DeJong and Nolan Gorman. So with that being said, I think Nolan Gorman has been a guy that's really stood out to me in terms of how he's come into camp. Ollie Marmol has said he's looked like an entirely different hitter. He's really stressed the importance of not laying off the high fastball, but not chasing it. Nolan Gorman is a prolific power hitter from the left side that can really do some damage on that low off-speed stuff in the zone. But he was getting exposed early in his rookie year, as so often happens. That's what happens when you make it to the big leagues. Big league pitchers catch on to you and you get exposed, and he had a hard time adjusting to it. So he went into the offseason with this game plan of, I am not going to get exposed on the high fastball. I'm not going to chase, because if I keep chasing that pitch, they're never going to give me the pitch that I can actually do damage with, which is that low off-speed. So he's come in and he's completely wowed the staff with his discipline. He can see that high fastball. He can lay off it. He can foul it off, or every now and then do some damage with it. That's not necessarily the pitch that he's looking to do damage with, obviously. But he can, in a pinch, either fight it off and give himself another chance to see that low kind of change-up off-speed offering, or every now and then he's increased his contact rate overall. Defense has looked really good at second base. He's made a couple of nifty double plays. Looks pretty confident. And I know there were a couple of questions about Nolan Gorman and if he would adjust to playing second base with the shift restrictions. So far, he's looked very sure-handed at second base there. So that's someone that's really stood out to me from the position playing side. Pitching side is another story. We haven't seen 3 of the starters yet. In Flaherty, Matt Montgomery, that will change ideally by next Monday. We'll hopefully have seen all of them. I've been impressed by Zach Thompson and the velocity he's added. The way that he was able to do that was he started emulating Ryan Helsley's setup from the left side. Zach Johnson's always been a pitcher that set up relatively high before pitches. Now it'd be like kind of under his chin. Now he comes and he gets set and he holds his glove nearly eye level like Helsley does. And that's been one of the changes that has led to him adding 1 to 3 miles per hour of velocity. I asked him why, and he said, I just watched Helsley and thought, worked out well for him, so I might as well try it. And that left side of the bullpen for the Cardinals, I think, is their most competitive area. You guys have Genesis Cabrera. They have guys like Packy Naughton. Jojo Romero got his first taste of spring action today. And that's not even talking about all the lefty depth they have in Matthew Liberatore. Thompson, of course, as we mentioned, there's a lot going on for not a lot of spots. And I'm really interested to see who kind of takes advantage there and claims that last bullpen spot.
Speaking of Gorman, I was wondering, and this is something a lot of people assume Donovan's going to be the starting second baseman, but who would you predict? And I don't think the Cardinals even know the answer to this. If both are healthy, Gorman or Donovan gets more starts at second base this year?
Oh, that's a good question. I will lean with Gorman because Donovan can just play anywhere. And I feel like Donovan thrives and kind of makes this whole lineup click as a super utility. Will he probably see the most of his starts at second base? I would say there's potentially, but I mean, he can play shortstop, he can play third, he can play both corner outfield positions. And with the way that Ollie Marmol likes to manage, the fluidity in which he rolls out his lineups, the flexibility, different hitters each day, different position players each day, and the lineup is always changing, I think Brendan Donovan is kind of the glue in that. So I'd expect him to keep playing around the diamond. I mean, it worked out pretty well for him last year. He does have the first ever utility Gold Glove award. And I think that's something that they'd like to, keep implementing for 2023.
Katie, thanks. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you very much for your hard work. You've done an outstanding job ever since you've been on the beat. And, one of the things that's, very helpful for us is when reporters like you, we have these questions that come up and, you're with the team all the time and you give those, timely updates and answers. And you're one of the, several people that, I rely on just for my fandom of general work. So we haven't had a chance to talk before, but I just wanted to say thanks for everything you've done.
Oh, thank you. Really kind of you. I appreciate that.
But I did wanted to ask you about the bullpen. To me seems, a little bit there's, people are always worried about the pitching, but it seems like that they're a couple, one or even multiple people could find themselves optioned to AAA that you never would have expected. And I wanted to get your take on it. So if you assume that, okay, Gallegos, Helsley, Hicks, Stratton, that's 4, there's going to be 8 bullpen spots because they're opening the season. We're not having expanded rosters to open the season, right? It's 26 Correct. As opposed to the last couple of years when we've been treated to, 28 or 30 man opening day roster, right? So if you have Gallegos, Helsley, Hicks, and Stratton, and you got to assume that unless, Verhagen just completely screws up in the spring, he's got a spot. So that's 5. And Wilking Rodriguez is a Rule 5 pick. And if a lot of those guys don't make it, but he'll have to be put on outright assignment waivers and offered to the other clubs first if he doesn't make it. But it sounds like he's got a legit shot because of his triple-digit fastball. So you say that's 6. And you got to have a left-hander in there. And so you would say that Cabrera probably has an inside track on that. So that means now you're either in the position of not having a second left-hander and putting Dakota Hudson in there for long relief protection, or you're if you do that, you're leaving Jake Woodford and Andre Palante, the latter of whom was on the roster all year and didn't get optioned. So, I mean, do you think that there's a non-trivial possibility that Dakota Hudson might find himself optioned to AAA to they say get a second left-hander?
These are all great points and great questions and something I've thought about pretty extensively through the start of spring. And I don't have a great answer for you because it seems like no matter where the Cardinals go and what option they do, someone very important, someone pivotal to their success is getting left out. Do I think that Dakota Hudson could start the year in AAA? Based on the Cardinals needing starting pitching depth, yes. This is the same reason I think Jake Woodford, who I thought has looked fantastic this spring in his early outings. I mean, the velo is up, changeup grip looks good with this new grip that he has. Slider looks good, the pitch that they really wanted him to work on last year. I think guys like Libby, Woodford, Dakota could open up in AAA because they're going to need that AAA depth. They're going to need starting depth. They have so much relief depth, but they don't have a lot of depth in AAA outside of those three guys that I mentioned. So they could potentially go there. I mean, Jake Woodford has the option, and he's kind of always the odd man out, unfortunately. So that makes sense. I don't know. I mean, I can't really fathom a way that Palante, when healthy, doesn't make this roster, because I mean, he earned the spot last year. He was not on their radar at all, and he impressed so well in spring that they gave him the shot, and he was never in consideration to go back down at all through 2022. He does have reverse splits, so he can kind of double as that second left-hander. They've done it before where they carried only one true lefty and used Palante as a left-hander reliever option. Even though he's right-handed, it's a little unorthodox, but it did work. But then we go in, like I said, we go into problems with like Zach Thompson, who's looked really good. You have Jojo Ribeiro, who's really nasty when he's in the zone. Drew Verhagen and Chris Stratton, they can't go to the minors unless they accept the assignment. And I doubt the Cardinals agree to an arbitration contract with Stratton just to not use him. And Verhagen, although they plan to use him as a reliever. So again, I don't have a great answer for you, but this is a good problem to have, right? If you're the Cardinals, you want to be overwhelmed with solid options. And for the first time, and since I've been on the beat, they have plenty of pitching depth options. So a lot of these things will sort themselves out through spring. You never want to wish injury or hardship on a player, but sometimes these problems solve themselves. But right now, it's really interesting to see who's going to kind of run away and claim that last spot, because it does seem like there are 6-7 guys going for one spot left in that bullpen.
Meanwhile, when you talk about the bench, you know, you have to figure that it's going to be Kisner, DeYoung, some sort of Yepez Gorman platoon with the third option, and then you only have 4 spots. And I mean, unless I would guess that, I mean, it would be wrong in assuming that that unless Jordan Walker were to somehow just blow the lid off the place and win some sort of starting job, that he would open the season in AAA, because, you know, the number one, you have the DH penalty. And even if they were to stick him in there, even if he could, I just don't know that they would want him. It would be advisable for him to be the 4th outfielder.
Right. That's also a great point, because they're not going to call Jordan Walker up for him to sit the bench, right? And this is not a Jordan Walker thing. I think the Cardinals have been right. They're not going to do that to anyone. They haven't with their top prospects. They've been very honest and very consistent that they promote their top prospects when there is a place for them to play every day. Now, Jordan Walker has the opportunity to go out there and win the job. If he has a stellar spring and knocks the door down, and one of Lars, Tyler, Dylan doesn't perform well, then there's a legitimate shot he makes it. But if all 3 of those outfielders, which is what the Cardinals are hoping for, have the springs that they want to see, then Walker probably opens the season on AAA, and we'll see how Yepez, or a combination of Yepez and Burleson, do in the corners. The defense is what is a concern for both players. Obviously, they are bat-first guys. Ollie Marmol was talking about it today, how he was joking with Yepez about his defense in a way that, you know, they're making light of a situation because Yepez knows how hard he needs to work at it. So it's not like for lack of effort, but I think to open the year, I don't see Jordan Walker coming in as a corner reserve spot. I think it's all or nothing.
Do you feel like Alec Burleson has graduated past? I mean, I realize he's, you know, was drafted in the same year that Walker was, but he does have almost a full year or close at AAA. Has he graduated to that point now where they don't feel like he's got to play every day and would need to be in Memphis, that they're ready to let him take a back of the bench role, competing for playing time at DH, or occasionally in the outfield, or occasionally at first base?
Yeah, great points. And let's shout out Randy Flores in that 2020 draft class. I mean,
yeah, no kidding.
Chase that guy. Yes and no. I think what we saw from Burleson at the last of the 2022 season wasn't indicative of who he is as an overall player. I think he got called up at a really tough time during the Albert Pujols home run a day era. Cardinals were going on and winning the division, and it's a really hard time for a rookie to get called up and expect to thrive in that environment. So I don't think we've seen the best of Burleson, but I don't think that what we saw was like his peak by any means. Just based on the overall athleticism and who they have projected in their starting outfield, I do think the Cardinals are okay with Burleson being a bench bat, especially from the left side, and being, you know, a pinch hitter they can rely on, or a late inning. You know, he's never going to be a defensive replacement, but he could spell a guy every now and then who needs a break and get lifted defensively in late games, close games if needed. But yeah, I think this organization's still high on Burleson. I don't think they're valuing him based on how he performed in 2022. I think they're pretty eager to see what he can do this spring.
Yeah. Well, and the underlying stats for Burleson last year were pretty encouraging.
Right.
And I know that they take a lot of stock in that, as they should. So
if somebody were to get injured among the 3 starting outfielders, do you think Jordan Walker would instantly be on the opening day roster, or do you think they would go with Burleson or Yepes, or even move Donovan to the outfield and let Walker get more reps in the outfield and maybe prove himself in AAA, because he hasn't played a bat in AAA yet?
I think it just depends on how Walker adjusts. I mean, he's there. He's going to get a lot of playing time this spring with 2 of those starting outfielders out, right? That's why you haven't seen Dylan Carlson in center that often, because they figure he's going to get so much rep there when Tyler leaves. So it's up to Jordan, really. And I'm not saying you have to go to AAA to be successful. I mean, like we've seen Julio Rodriguez, right? But it wouldn't hurt him if he starts the year in AAA. Jordan Walker is an exceptional talent. That dude is, I think, probably the most exciting prospect in Cardinals land in years. I don't think that, they're going to necessarily rush him up to the big leagues just because they can. But if he goes out there and he earns it, they'll definitely put it under consideration.
Heather, you've been quiet. Yeah, go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, I that kind of leads me to my question, because I'm extremely excited about Jordan Walker. Do you have a guess? If you had to make a guess, when do you think they would call him up if everything goes according to their plan? What do you think? Just if someone wanted to say, like, get tickets to that game before the third crisis, just for the listeners out there,
First of all, very cute dog, 10 out of 10.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I keep trying to tell him to lay down, but he will not.
No,
animals
they only want something to do with us when we're super busy. My cat's the same way.
There's a cat that's been running around here too.
Amazing.
It's a zoo. So
amazing. I think it really depends. I think it depends on what the club needs at the time. I think it's reasonable to expect that Walker will debut at some point in 2023. But I mean, look, Nolan Gorman last year tore the cover off the ball in April. And it took not a super long time, but longer than most fans would have liked for him to get called up. And they only did that because there was an opening in terms on the roster. Eventually Paul DeYoung was optioned back to Memphis, or to Memphis. I shouldn't say back to Memphis, because it had been a significant while since he'd been there. But I don't think there's a way to tell. Usually the teams, all 30 teams in baseball, will do a hard look at their staff, their club, around June, because you head into July and that's trade deadline season and everything is crazy and no one sleeps and everybody's crying. But that's really when clubs can take a look and say, okay, here's our biggest need. Here's what we're sorely lacking. Here's what we need to make the postseason, to make a deep run, whatever it is. And that's when teams can start evaluating, here's who we can afford to lose. So I doubt the Cardinals were looking to trade Harrison Bader in May. Heck, they weren't looking to trade him in the days leading up to the trade deadline.
Yeah.
But once that deadline comes and you're like, okay, I'm desperate for this, for X, here's Y that we can offer. Well, if Cardinals could be in the market for something and they have plenty of outfield depth, and that could be a position that Walker is promoted just by trade. There's injuries that happen. There's straight up performance. It really, I think all the factors kind of rely on each other, and I don't think there's a true way to tell, but I will say we'll probably learn a lot about the expectations for Walker over the next couple of weeks as he plays what should be nearly every day starting, March 6th, when the World Baseball Classic begins to really kick off.
Katie, I wanted to get your take on since you mentioned the World Baseball Classic and you're going to be covering it. I don't remember, and I could be wrong, so please correct me if I'm relying on something that is inaccurate, but I don't remember the degree of participation that we're seeing now among all the teams, especially with people that are on the 40-man rosters of the clubs participating in the World Baseball Classic. That's essentially cutting their spring training short like it is now. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I also think this tournament grows larger and larger each year. And that's exciting, right? I really think the World Baseball Classic is so unique. And I know there's gripes about the timing of the year, or you don't want people getting hurt before the season starts. But the fact of the matter is there's never an ideal time to do this tournament. Now, I do like how guys like Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado recruited some of the best of the game to play and represent regardless of their country. I also completely understand guys like Contreras who felt like they had an obligation to their own team and sat it out. But I do think that there is the rise in this game is intentional. The rise in interest in this tournament is intentional. And I'm glad to see it because I think it allows viewers of the common game, casual MLB fan, to understand the cultures of some of these players, right? So, there's always going to be people that don't like the bat flip or think there's excessive celebration. But what they don't understand is, if you see a player from the DR celebrate and what someone who's not from that country may think is wild or excessive, that's how they play the game back in their home country. And that's what their culture represents. So for me, and what I hope the World Baseball Classic teaches to people is how baseball is celebrated through different countries and different origins, different cultures. That to me is, I think, what is really going to grow this tournament.
Sure. I mean, I agree with all those points. And I think that, especially about the culture ones is very important. What I'm curious about, though, is that, and I don't know, maybe from the Cardinals or some other clubs, but, you can imagine that, let's say that you deal with injuries every spring,
Right.
Whether you really like it or not, it always happens. But you can imagine a club maybe saying, okay, if somebody got injured on my watch, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. But you get any sense of either frustration or resistance, even though it's obviously good for growing the game? You get any attitudes among, either coaches or executives of clubs where they say, I don't know that I want him used maybe the way the World Baseball Classic people are going to may use him, and I don't have any control over it, or do they? Can they go to the World Baseball Classic people and say, look, I don't want him throwing 3 innings in a row,
Yes.
or I don't want him pitching 2 days in a row, or something like that?
Yes, the parent club is able to be like, hey, you're essentially borrowing. I hate talking to like players like they're property,
Sure.
but you're essentially borrowing this person from us. So here are some stipulations. For example, we talked about the Palante pitch limit. I will say the Cardinals have been pretty open-minded. Ollie Marmol is all about having their players go play. It helps when you've had guys like Nolan and Goldschmidt do well in this tournament. I mean, they won it the last time they played, and talked about how much it helped them get ready for the season, how much they enjoyed it, and how they thought it was a better test than spring. But not all teams are like that. Some teams are a little more hesitant and, want their star players to stay back. It's never going to be perfect, right? There's never going to be the ideal perfect tournament scenario situation. But I think the Cardinals have done a good job in letting their players go out and represent their country. The Cardinals did, however, not let any of their coaching or staff participate in the tournament. Those players or those people and those employees, they felt it was too imperative for them to miss. They couldn't miss the day-to-day operations of spring training. So no staff from the Cardinals organization was allowed to participate, but the players could. So it really is as an organization by organization thing. I'm not familiar enough with the inner workings of the 29 other organizations to know where the Cardinals rank on that. But given the amount of players they have participating, it seems pretty obvious to me that the Cardinals are one of the more accepting organizations when it comes to the World Baseball Classic.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other roster related questions, guys? I've got one, just one to kind of finish on.
Sure.
Paul DeYoung struggled last year. Club, obviously had him under contract. I think there was some speculation. I was probably part of the field for that too, that he wouldn't be with the club this year. He seemed like a possible trade candidate from some of their behaviors in the past. If Tommy Edman, we don't wish this on him, but if he were to get hurt for a significant length of time, would it be Paul DeYoung's spot, or do you think Brendan Donovan would see quite a bit of time at shortstop?
It would be Paul DeYoung if he hits. I mean, look, that's why he's still here. That's why the Cardinals aren't even that worried about his, kind of fatigued arm to start the year, because they all know he can field. Paul DeYoung's probably one of the most sure-handed defenders on the roster. It's can he hit? And for the last couple of years, he hasn't been able to. So this is Paul's kind of last chance to show that he can, I don't want to say find his 2019 form, but can find, if Paul DeYoung hits 230 to 240, but has significant pop and hits for doubles and home runs off the bench, you take that production. There's room for that given the flexibility of their lineup. But the only time I see Paul DeYoung starting every day is if he hits, well, and not just hits well, like average hits, like, and blows the cover off the ball. So Paul DeJong is most likely going to be a bench player, but even to get there, he has to be able to hit this spring.
All right, changing gears completely. We've gotten to talk to a few of the beat writers over the years. We had Jeff Jones at the trade deadline last year, and well, really, this version of this podcast isn't old enough to say that we've had more than that. But if you don't mind, can we talk a little bit about what it's like to be a beat writer for the Cardinals? Like, what's that experience like? Because the Cardinals seem like they would be first of all, a great team to cover, all the history, very competitive every year, always something interesting going on. But at the same time, it also kind of seems like they might be tight-lipped, maybe would be one way to put it, a pretty closed organization, So what's that been like for you?
Well, it's funny because I always, being a beat writer was my dream job. And I always said I didn't care where I went, what organization called, I would go in a heartbeat. And when I saw there was an opportunity with my dream company to cover the Cardinals, I said, even though I knew nothing about the city of St. Louis, I said, well, you are not going to get a chance to cover a team that's more consistently good and more ingrained in baseball, just given, the baseball town, the history that you mentioned, than St. Louis. So that in itself was super exciting because beat writing is, I don't want this to come off as a complaint. I love it, but it's a very demanding job. Like, it's 7:00 here. I got to work at 7 a.m. Still have a story to write when I get home. And that's just kind of how it is until whenever they're eliminated. But covering the Cardinals, I really don't think I could have gotten a more professional organization in terms of how things are handled. Ollie Marmol and even Mike Schilt during his tenure, nothing but respectful. They really understand the job. They understand the importance of media, and they understand the importance of having a good relationship. Same with the clubhouse. The clubhouse is a very professional clubhouse. They're always available for questions, always available to talk things out. So that's been really interesting just to kind of walk into and see how that culture is. Then, of course, you have the history, the Hall of Famers coming back all the time, getting to cover Albert Pujols in 2022 in a Cardinals uniform, and you're still like, what? Even though that was pretty surreal. Can the organization be tight-lipped with media? Yes, of course. But nearly every organization is some version of tight-lipped. I actually think it's better to cover a tight-lipped organization than one that is loose and fast and doesn't always say the accuracy, because all of a sudden you dug yourself into a hole that the people that you're supposed to trust led you into. So is it a little bit difficult sometimes? Yes, but that just means you have to work a little harder. That just means you have to cultivate sources outside the organization and, do your best to check in when you can. The thing is not everyone's going to help you because that's not their job. Your job is to get information regardless of how not helpful people are sometimes. But covering the Cardinals seriously, I mean, the fan base has been so accepting from day one. And that's something that's been I've been really grateful for, because I don't do this for me. Like, this is a great job. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I'm not writing stories about these players or this organization. For me, I want to do it because I want to help fans feel connected to their favorite team. So the fact that fans have been so welcoming and engaging to someone who didn't know anything about St. Louis and, actually didn't really like the Cardinals growing up because they always played the Giants in the postseason, and I grew up a Giants fan, to have a fan base that has been so eager and accepting and has helped me feel connected to this team and to them, I think that's been the best part.
I do want to say too, I think a lot of it, you have this very natural sort of charisma and great personality. I got to watch you at winter warm-up work, and it was a great experience for me because you had so much confidence, and I wrote about it too a little bit. And so I just wanted to say that too, that it was very,
so nice.
It was very cool. It was very cool to see. I know Mosaic kind of joked with you about the sports writer of the year thing, but I did want to bring that up again because I think that's super cool. And I just want to bring that up. I don't really have a question. Just a bunch of praise.
That's super nice of you. And that's funny that you mentioned that, because I do remember he was kind of, joking about it, saying, well, why don't you have the first question? Yeah. And then he was like, oh, you probably don't even have a question, do you? And
but
I was
like,
wow, the bar is that low.
Yeah.
The bar is that low where you think I don't have a question for the first press conference of the year. But it's stuff like that. We have to be serious with the manager and the front office and the players, but we can joke around a lot. I mean, and I like that you said that about confidence, because it wasn't always like that. And I'm still kind of a hot mess, but you learn to embrace it. Like, I literally tripped over nothing yesterday walking past Connor Thomas and Andre Palante. Like, just, oh, there's your cat. Like, just
Yeah,
tripped over
there
my
you
own 2 feet. And like, there was nothing smooth about that, nothing confident about that. And they both just kind of looked at me and were like, how does that happen? I'm like, I don't know. And you just kind of own it. But confidence is something that I work on every single day. Sometimes my motto is fake it till you make it. Like, it's easier with time, but as you can see, it's a demanding environment sometimes. And props for you for doing winter warm up, because that was like press conference overload. It was so much.
I couldn't even stay for the whole thing for a lot of it. And I was like, I don't know. I'm exhausted. I don't know how you guys do this as a job, you know?
It was
I
a
was
lot,
so
but it's
tired.
fun.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And it was exciting to like meet people that I read and never actually seen in person before. So it was a very cool experience. So I'm
glad you
very,
got
I'm
to do that.
very grateful to have gotten
Yeah,
to do it.
absolutely. I hope I see you next year.
Yeah.
Every time I feel like that Viva Birdos should try to get a press pass, I always think to myself, or I could just sit on my couch and read Katie Wu. So
Yeah.
well, guys, do you have any other final questions, any quick hits about rosters or anything, Cardinals media journalism for Katie while we got her?
Have you had a cool interaction with a player since you've been on the beat? Just kind of funny or anything like that?
Besides
Yeah.
tripping in front of Connor Thomas.
Yeah, well, that was great. The other day I was trying to get, I'm not going to name the player, but I was trying, if you guys do your research, you might be able to figure this out. So it'll be a little teaser. There was a rogue lizard that was placed in a player's locker, and he was straight up not having a good time about it. And my cat brings in lizards all the time, so I'm like an expert lizard catcher. And this player was really freaking out. He was like petrified of this thing. And I was like, all right, do you want me to get out of your locker for you? And he goes out, yeah, like if you don't mind, actually, that'd be great. And it's a tiny lizard. It's maybe the size of my pinky. And those things are quick. And it's like stuck on the wall of this locker. And the clubhouse at Roger Dean is not great. It's very small. The lockers are even smaller. And I'm looking at this lizard and I'm like, okay. And I turn around. I'm like, my biggest fear right now is not the lizard. It's the fact that I'm going to miss because he's so small and I'm going to drop him and he's going to get lost in your stuff. And he goes, yeah, I'm really worried that you're going to do that, to be honest. Like, I have no confidence in you. And then the player next to him, who I'll also not name, was like, I give her 3 chances before she messes up. I didn't even get to 3. First attempt, dropped the lizard, went into another player's cleat, and then jumped back into the locker, and we could not find it. And it was a thing. It was like, he's like, you had one job, I trusted you. And I was like, first of all, I offered to do this. And I warned you that like the bar, like I may not be able to reach this level of expectation. We eventually got the lizard out. It was all good. But that's what happens on a slow spring training news day inside the Cardinals clubhouse, lizard catching.
That's awesome.
Now I'm trying to figure out what kind of research I'd have to do to be able to figure out who that was. Like, I was thinking in-depth stat cast or going back through the history. I mean, it can't be Miklas. We know his thoughts on lizards, so
Right.
It's got to be someone else.
Yeah.
It's narrowed it down to 39 of 40. So
There you go. Process of elimination.
yeah. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, Katie, we're so glad to have you on and so thankful you can give us some of your time on a very busy day here today. But yeah, for those that are here, when this is published, but we will publish this on Saturday morning. And otherwise, hopefully we can have you on again during the season and keep doing that awesome work.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you guys so much for having me. You guys do great stuff too. It's fun to see people that I know on Twitter in kind of real life. So thanks so much, you guys.
Yeah. Well, let's see, Blake and Gabe and Heather and Mike and Katie, we are so thankful that you joined us here on the VEB podcast, and we will see you next time. Have a wonderful Saturday.